note of it, but the indigenous persons are actually planning for another census. That was a very big issue to me, and we shall be waiting to see what comes out. I hope they will be able to communicate to us once that is actually going on. Thank you.
Yes, the indigenous peoples. The issue of discussing the discussion for regarding the census for indigenous people. I know how it originated. I know how it originated, and probably we push it forward. Maybe it will answer some questions that the indigenous peoples are facing now. Kruthum, where is my microphone? On this table? Yes. Topo, it is the turn for your table.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yesterday, during the presentations, I captured that the heart is a global voluntary carbon program or architecture that takes into consideration registration, verification, and issuance of high quality RED plus emission reduction outcomes. And it had a vision that provides confidence needed in the integrity of carbon emissions. And this is meant to unlock certain issues that take into consideration things like large scale investments. And secondly, what I learned that was very interesting is that within the 7 safeguards, they focus on structure, process, and outcome. And within the 7, we have 16 themes that inform and define the conditions, and 44 indicators, which we feel can measure the outcomes of our country is prepared to take through the process of the RED Plus. Thank you.
Yes, he picked the fact that there are 7 safeguards, 16 sub-themes, and 44 indicators. Yes, that is commendable. The last table, I still recall.
Good morning, everyone. Most of what we wanted to say has been noted, but mostly the last session, which was a cafe, where we are trying to look at the policies and laws addressing the Cancun safeguards. And we note that most of our policies are interlinked and aligned to issues of RED Plus, such as the National Environment Act and the Forestry and Tree Planting Act and the Wildlife Act.
Thank you. Another contribution from TIST. Is it TIST? Yes, yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Bacho Hakim from TIST program. What I learned from yesterday's presentation about Cancun safeguards, I learned that Cancun safeguard says something about the indigenous people in this way. I learned that we should give respect of the indigenous people and local communities. Secondly, I learned that safeguard requires that RED initiatives takes place into account national and international obligations. And thirdly, I learned that safeguard requires that indigenous people and local communities be fully and effectively involved in RED Plus. Thank you.
So you have heard for yourselves what different people picked from the presentations made yesterday. We shall carry on with the learning from the presenters today. And to start today's meeting is none other than Mr. Xavier Mugumya Nyindo, who is the pioneer focal person for RAID. Xavier, if you can step forward and make a presentation to us on the summary of information to the UNFCCC. Xavier. Emma, where is Emma?
And I would need some assistance in connecting with my computer.
Emma is coming.
Yes.
If you can do the introduction as he prepares to project.
So once again, I greet you, your respective capacities. My name is Xavier Nyindo Mugumya, retired forest officer. That is my favorite way of putting it. But I also happen to have an opportunity and a privilege to lead the national process for RAID+. And together with my team leader, who is now the Commissioner for Climate Change, we undertook the first part of the RAID+ readiness until we handed over to our current team leader, who is now working on the second phase and leading us to the third phase. So had I got the chance to speak on the table, I would have mentioned that the opportunities which we used to think were far away at that time about results-based payments are starting to become a reality. And since climate change came slowly, nobody knew when they were starting the revolution of using fuel about 200 years ago. Nobody knew until 1989 when the first conference of okay. If they have already entered it, then I can actually stand there. This one doesn't yet move because there is one they are using over there. So I am sharing with you members the report that Uganda submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention in 2021. That report was called Uganda's RAID+ First Summary of Information to the UNFCCC. And the next, please. Someone who is helping. Hey, this is the technology I'm not familiar with. Okay, so this is the outline of the presentation. I will share with you the origin of RAID+ safeguards. So yesterday we talked about them, but we don't know where they came from. So I thought maybe a minute or two about their origin would help us to capacitate us. And then by inference, the origin of the summary of that information and how Uganda came to participate in sharing its report. I will share with you information which is normally expected in a summary of information of safeguards. I will also share with you some common definitions that are not completely obvious. Sometimes we use them interchangeably. And I will also share with you the actual information that Uganda submitted in that summary of information. Okay, so patiently, this is what countries agreed to negotiate. The agenda item was proposed by Costa Rica and Papua New Guinea in 2000, I think, 5. That conference was in Canada, and they requested that since clean development mechanism had not delivered for developing countries, and that developing countries had forests, which were not only contributing to removing greenhouse gases, but also when they burn, returning the greenhouse gases, then countries could consider ways of supporting them. And so they were told to wait, and in 2007, an agenda item was put on the Conference of Parties discussion, and it was called Policy Approaches and Positive Incentives. So those 2 points are the ones which the coordinator yesterday, the focal point yesterday, was mentioning, that the countries look at their policies of forestry and those sectors which work or affect or are affected by forestry, and they look at them in such a way that positive incentives for those policy approaches could be identified. Positive incentives could be identified on the issues of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, including the roles of conservation, sustainable management of forests, and enhancement of forest carbon stocks in developing countries. Developing countries, because developed countries were already having permission to use their forests to account for their emissions. The Kyoto Protocol gave them almost freedom to use their forests. It didn't give us the permission to use our forests. So that was how that agenda item was identified. And the argument in 2007 was that there was no information available for developing countries. Developing countries knew that they had been practicing forestry for more than 100 years, especially those who had been working under the colonies of the French, the colonies of the British. They were already doing a lot of forestry. So they knew information was available. But they still said, you start with identifying the methods. So in 2007, they formed an agenda item called methodological approaches for these 2 points. It was until 2010 in a city called Cancun, which belongs to Mexico, that countries now solved the other methodologies and agreed on these activities. These are the activities we have been working through: reducing emissions from deforestation, also reducing emissions from degradation. So to get an idea, many people who drive through Jinja, they say Mavira is just a hollow, but it is still a forest. So that means it is degraded. It is not completely removed. Then when you see areas which have been encroached or taken over by other people and they remove the entire cover, it becomes deforested. So that's the difference usually for the two. And these two contribute slightly differently with the different amounts that each one can contribute. So then countries which had forests that were already contributing to biological diversity, they wanted those forests conserved. And they also wanted those forests to be managed sustainably. And also the potential for increasing the carbon stocks directly by looking after them or by using other means to support the natural way of adding carbon stocks. So you can afforest, you can reforest, you can encourage natural growth. So they included these 5 activities. So be patient. This is now where our safeguards are going to come in. Okay. So the other one was aspiration to manage well, to reduce deforestation, to reduce degradation. But to reach there, countries agreed, I have gone faster than I thought. Yes, countries agreed that they should do things that will prove that actually they are interested in addressing the other 5 components. So they should prepare a strategy or action plan, prepare a baseline, which they call the forest reference emission level, and prepare a monitoring system, and also a system for safeguards. Now, our safeguards word has joined. So the safeguard is in the same measure as the plan. This is not a daughter or a son. These are co-managers.
Next. Next, let us put so with the wait, find out. Then as long as I will continue to speak. Yes. Please continue.
Yeah, so it will come. On safeguards, the countries were more concerned. You see, these negotiations were including both developing countries who own these forests and developed countries who wanted these forests to contribute. So in the negotiations, they wanted to make sure that developing countries would not take an advantage and present their forests without any precautions. And so they provided 2 annexes, 2 paragraphs in one annex. One was called a guidance. I still need help for it to reach. One was called a guidance, and then the other one was called a paragraph on safeguards. The guidance is rarely talked about, but it is also a form of safeguard. And it had about 10 or so points. So some of those points are here. And very quickly, they said those countries who have now accepted to do the REDD+ activities should be aware that these REDD+ activities are contributing to achieving the objectives of the convention, the 2nd article of the convention. Now, those who are not familiar, the 2nd article of the convention is similar to the goal of the Paris Agreement. Actually, the Paris Agreement said we are continuing with the same goal of the convention. And it has part A and part B. Part A of the convention says to stabilize the greenhouse gases so that they don't affect the ecosystems and the atmosphere and the things of the earth. That's the first the objective of the convention. The second one was that it does so in such a way that it does not stop development, especially development of countries that did not contribute to these greenhouse gases. They mean developing countries, and especially the least developed countries. like ours. So this was part of that guidance. And then the contribution to Article 4, Paragraph 3, already the convention had a line which mentions that forests are important for climate change. So it still brought it back to mention that we should not forget that forests were already agreed on in 1992 that they were very important for climate change. So I will not read all of them. They will take all the time that we have. But these are the points which are like a precursor to the safeguards. And some of them which are very interesting, those who wanted to support with financial support and technical support, they said RED Plus activities should be results-based. So if you have results, bring your pro forma invoice and submit your request for payment. That's what the coordinator was mentioning yesterday, that we actually have a potential payment of 30, did he mention something between 30 and 35 million? That is the results-based payment that is results-based. So Uganda was able to prove that it had achieved a reduction in deforestation, one of the 5 elements. Okay. So that was the paragraph of guidance. This was the paragraph of a safeguard. So the other one was, the guidance is like if you have a bicycle, they say keep balancing yourself, make sure if you are, look forward, don't look sideways, so that you don't fall down. That's the general guidance. But for the safeguards, they say you must have a mud guard. Mud gadi. Aha. So mud gadi in my language are these safeguards. They were mentioning them. Our team leader from the Department of Environment already listed them yesterday. Our consultant mentioned them and our team leader. So the first one, again, is that they are not replacing your forests. No. RED Plus should support your forest policies, your forest activities. This is the very first one. And the other time we mentioned it was policy approaches. So these are the policy approaches they want you to do well so that we can look for incentives. They wanted transparency and effectiveness of the governance structures, respect for knowledge and rights, effective participation, conservation, and actions to address risks of reversal, and actions to reduce displacement. You are familiar with them. Yesterday they shared with us. But I am bringing now that summary of how these safeguards came in. So countries agreed that forests were useful, developing country forests were useful, but they had to be harnessed in a certain way. They agreed on 5 activities. One of them was safeguards. Then they said these safeguards have to be clarified. So this was the clarification of mentioning what they are, including the other guidance. Excuse me. So this is now the origin of the summary of information. They wanted to find out how will they know that these safeguards are actually being looked after, that the countries have taken them seriously. So they said safeguards should be addressed and respected, and countries should establish a system for doing so. So they said systems for providing information. They said countries must provide information and build a system with these bullets that is consistent with the guidance, the other guidance which we have read through, those bullets, about 10 bullets, which is transparent and consistent information that is available to all stakeholders. So if a stakeholder has difficulty accessing the information you are sharing, you find a way of adjusting it so that the person can access it and think about it. That you also provide information on how you are addressing and respecting those safeguards. Then that the countries take charge of implementing these safeguard information exchanges and sharing, and also you don't remove what you are already doing, but you build on the systems that you are already working on as a country. That is what, then they said on timing and frequency of presentation of this information, they said that countries can freely and voluntarily present this information through their traditional national communication. And as a country, our communication has been about 4 years, every 4 years, until if we can afford, we can do it even 2 years. And if you can also afford, there is a platform which was established for Red Plus where you can submit. Then they mentioned that in terms of frequency, again, it should be consistent with when you are providing the other information that the UNCCC requires. And the provision also, the most recent summary of information on how safeguards are being addressed and respected is one of the requirements in order for countries to be eligible for results-based payment. So yesterday, Mr. Kazungu, Commissioner Kazungu mentioned that he's preparing a proposal with the support of FAO to receive payments which are called results.
Now, these results-based payments will be possible if it doesn't have a summary of information. Because that is the only information actually. The other is only for it, how we generate it, and so on. That is in the system. So without this summary, we are not able to take and input and submit. So that is now that history of this that. So I am requesting you to also keep in mind the years. I could continue because the computer still has some power. Why you wait for the power to die? So the next slide, I think is about the information expected to be in the summary of the information on the sector. I would never but listening and looking, that was helps the brain. But when we listen, one of them is that the information on how these sectors are being addressed and respected support national strategies, action plans, and being included in all phases of the class. So yesterday, our commissioner mentioned that the class was agreed up 3 phases. The first phase was called the readiness, whereby countries prepare the other elements called strategy, baseline, that's the readiness phase. Now, once countries are completed that phase, they can start implementing some of those activities more priority, while receiving additional capacity support, as well as acquiring technology and financing. So that was like the second phase. The third phase was called results-based phase. So that way, you will have been able to demonstrate and integrate results, and that those results are the additional capacity. You still tell them stakeholders were working with like this was the extent they accept that as a so if they ask you later, you say
currently moved to that phase and we were understanding more.
Yes. So that while the power was away, I was on the first bullet. Now that it has come, I am going to the second bullet. So the second bullet says that countries undertaking RED Plus activities should provide a summary of information on how all safeguards are being addressed and respected throughout the implementation of these RED activities. Now, to remind you, the RED activities are the other 5 things you saw. Deforestation, you saw it. Degradation, you saw it. Conservation, you saw it. Sustainable management, you saw it. And enhancement, you saw it. Those are the 5 RED Plus activities. So the first bullet was saying 3 phases. Please explain what you did with the safeguards. Then they have said, for the 5 activities, please tell us how you have handled safeguards. Aha. So this third bullet is that the country is seeking to obtain. It is like I'm repeating the other one. If you want to get the results-based payment, the performance-based payment, if you want to submit an invoice, then you must make sure that you have submitted a summary of how you have been handling the safeguards. And that is the points of the summary that I'm going to share with you down. But I thought I needed to tell you this history. And they also repeat the information that you should not miss as much as possible. They mentioned that the information on your national circumstances, which is relevant for addressing and respecting safeguards. So you mentioned what you are passing through. You are hosting refugees, they have an influence on your country. You are between 17 countries, it has an influence on your safeguards. Whatever points you have, you mention them. Then you mention a description of each safeguard in accordance with the national circumstances, and you also explain how each of the other safeguards, there was a safeguard on forestry policies, a safeguard on governance, a safeguard on the participation, a safeguard on indigenous peoples and their knowledge, a safeguard on reversals and permanence, a safeguard on biological diversity. So each of them, you again tackle them and explain to them one by one how your national circumstances affects them in terms of status, in terms of prospects, in terms of national planning, and what you expect your people to deserve. Then the other one is that a description of existing systems and processes relevant to addressing and respecting safeguards, including the information systems. So again, this one touches what our team leader mentioned yesterday. So you explained that you have been having systems, and for each safeguard, you mentioned the systems that already are in existence. So this is the summary of the information they expect to see. I thought it would be nice to share with you some of the countries that have also been like us. They have been participating in RED Plus. They have also submitted their summaries of information on safeguards. Some countries more than the first summary. Some countries have submitted the second summary of information. Some countries have submitted the third summary of information. And after that one, they have submitted an invoice, if there is any place to put an invoice. You see the link between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Water and Environment. You perform, and then you explain to the Ministry of Finance and say, we have performed, here is the invoice. And the evidence is that you will have prepared this summary, So this summary has another relative, but that relative will be talked by my colleague, Mr. Begumana, that they also expect. It is called a technical annex. That one shows the evidence of the deforestation that you have reduced, or degradation that you have reduced, or the enhancement that you have done. That one is separate. When that time comes, he will support us. This one is the other sister, which is on the safeguard side. So they will have read the other one, which mentions how much your invoice value is. And then they will read this one, which also now says, we did everything that needed to be done and we did it well. So these are the countries, and your country is alphabetically arranged. It is here. We have Zambia on Z, we have Argentina on A, we have Fiji on F. So all these countries are participating in red. They are not seated. In fact, the commissioner mentioned yesterday that the global GCF, Global Climate Finance, had a pilot program on performance-based, which were calling results-based. And that program had $500 million, but it was oversubscribed. And by the time Uganda reached the desk, they had finished the $500 million US. And it was by special permission of the board that Uganda's application, the concept note which was prepared between Uganda and the FAO, was accepted alongside with the other three countries. He mentioned them: Laos, the Democratic Republic of Laos, Vietnam, and the PNG. You have heard of PNG, Papua New Guinea. The people look like us. So that is how now our results have come to be accepted and how they are dependent on these safeguards that we are talking about. Members, you get that connection, because the next slide is going to mention the information in our summary. Okay. Excuse me. Before that one, I borrowed some definitions from our long supporting team, the UN RED program. In 2007, the first financing mechanism that was available for supporting developing countries to do RED activities was the UN Collaborating Program and the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility of the World Bank. So together, they have been working, but the UN RED was able to mention some of the common explanations associated with the jargon that I have been mentioning. So I want to very quickly walk you through. So RED Plus safeguards are procedures and approaches that can help to ensure that RED activities do no harm to people, environment, but rather enhance social and environment. Almost similar to our traditional environment and social frameworks. Cancun safeguards, a set of 7 safeguards agreed to under UNFCCC, which should be promoted and supported when undertaking RED activities. You agree? We have been mentioning them. And safeguard information system is that system to provide information on how all these safeguards are being addressed and respected. So this word addressed and respected is not defined by the UN. They thought everybody would understand, but not necessarily that way. So they said addressed could mean how issue is covered by policies, laws, and regulations. So like our colleague was mentioning, our indigenous peoples addressed. So you would ask yourself, does our policies, laws, and regulations mention the indigenous peoples, for example, and give them the space they deserve? This is how you find the addressing component section. Then the respecting is that how these policies and so on are implemented, the difference they make on the ground. You have heard that the muvule is a very good tree and is very protected. But again, you have walked and see people cut it at random. So in terms of addressing, muvule is very protected. In terms of respect, is muvule respected? That's the simplest way of putting it. You also know another way. We drive on the left, and then you overtake on the right. But if you close your eyes, where does the border overtake? So yes, we have addressed the way of driving on our road, but respect leaves some things to desire. That's what they meant about these two terms. When you meet them, you will look at them from that angle. Okay, a few more. These are points which I entered in the presentation. They are from the other guideline, the first paragraph of the appendix. They are talking about the consistencies. When that presentation is shared with you, it will be easy for you to look at them. So the next stage, about 4 or 5 slides, are now mentioning what we actually wrote in our first summary. So up there, I was mentioning how this came about, but Uganda did actually write that report, the first summary. And we wrote it in anticipation of submitting our invoice because our team leaders working on deforestation and regulation had already proved that we had done something which is good for the atmosphere. So it has a section on introduction, and I am presenting it in a narrative form, not in a critical form. I was requested to present what we submitted, not what I think about what we submitted. So it has a national context section, it has a methodology section, it has a country approach to addressing and respecting safeguards, and it also goes deeper into the policy approach. So this is the country for general, and this is the policies directly addressing the safeguards, and then it has a conclusion and a list of recommendations. So the introduction has 3 parts. It is not a repetition of the table of contents. I picked what it was that constituted that background that Uganda gave. So first of all, the preparer was the Ministry of Water and Environment, and it was the submitter. And that submission is done through the web page by the focal point of climate change. Then the reason for that report was that the country wanted to comply with the UNFCCC requirements for providing periodic information on safeguards and some additional ones, but this report provides the following information: red activities or activities that were included in the summary of information, national circumstances relevant for addressing and respecting the safeguards, description of each safeguard in accordance with the national circumstances, existing systems, and how each safeguard has been addressed, and other relevant information. So if you recall, a few minutes ago, we had a list of what is expected in a summary of information. Now here is Uganda's summary of information. You are seeing that they are relatives. So that is how the Ugandan part was submitted, and this is the content. So Uganda gave the following summary on why it did this submission. 1, to disclose how Uganda's RED process has addressed and respected Cancun safeguards. 2, in addition to that, Uganda implemented the World Bank safeguard policies and processes as part of the requirements for Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. This is a very, very good score for us, and Uganda was also announcing it to the world. If you want to have this reasoning, some of you, like civil society organizations, have applied for grants to EU or to another funder. And when you are beginning the application, it says, if we already have an EU number, jump this section. I think I'm speaking, you are familiar with that. So it shows that if you have already taken a vaccine for COVID, then you don't need another vaccine for the other one. So that's why Uganda also was willing to announce it. It solves a lot of things. To serve also as a tool for legitimizing Uganda's RED strategy and implementation plan, whose strategic policy options significantly contribute towards national priorities, national development plan, country commitments towards sustainable development goals, and promoting confidence in RED plus safeguards process. This is where our country belongs. If these safeguards are not touching our needs, then these safeguards belong to other people. but we also did them for ourselves. This is what was there for us. And then, of course, responding to the local, national, and international audience, especially current and future-ready investments, and partners championing results-based payments. So in order to attract results-based payments, it was also our fundamental reason. So you have heard, for example, that a country wanting to achieve, let's say, a regional integration enters that objective into its constitution or establishes a law that does it. So when you mention this thing, it means now you are also integrating this in your policy approaches. I'm requesting you to warn me when I'm remaining with 30 minutes. Okay. Thank you, thank you. So in our report, in our summary report, we have the national context. And in this national context, we describe the institutional arrangements that are supporting RED. And at the time when we presented the report, it was the readiness component and also proposals on how we're going to use the safeguards during the implementation. Again, it also summarizes the policy, legal, and regulatory environment, reporting that the policy, legal, and regulatory environment are largely adequate to support RED Plus implementation and outlining how inadequacies will be addressed. So this report is actually publicly available. When you Google and say summary of information for RED Plus Uganda, it will come. So it was submitted there, but also it was uploaded on the Ministry of website. So it will actually appear. And when you look at it, you will go to page 8 and 9. You will find, it is a big chapter, a big section, but me, I have summarized it here. So the country felt that our laws are not bad, but they have weaknesses, and it also mentions those weaknesses. Then our report also summarizes Uganda's RED Plus process and achievements, acknowledging that FCPF led and other partners supported. We can't hide it. If we didn't get the 200,000, which we used to prepare the proposal for getting 3.6, it would not have been possible for us to do it on our own. If we didn't get 3.6 to attract UN RED is 3 million, we wouldn't have been able to move those mountains. If we didn't make a mid-term report and attract an additional 3.5, government of Uganda would not have put in 500,000 annually. So this is the statement it summarizes. The national context, again, it continues and mentions, again, this is the content of the report, but I am bringing it so that you can, it is beyond the table of contents. Of course, the table of contents, you will see what is there, but I have picked things which they say, what is there that you can now pick from our slides when they are shared to you. So the national context summarizes Uganda's RED process and achievements, and Uganda has completed preparing these following elements. So some of them are called the Cancun elements, others are called Warsaw frameworks. But these are some of the individual elements that were required to show that the country is serious about RED and that it is moving from readiness to the next phase of results-based. So we prepared a strategy, a reference baseline, a feedback grievance, a benefit sharing, a CESA, SMF, a monitoring system, a technical note. This technical note is not a very short note. The technical side, the National Forest Authority, prepared a document, the size of this report, for example, that I'm talking about, which was showing proof of what the country has achieved in terms of emission reductions. And then this was submitted, a process framework on how to handle the safeguard issues that were identified. And for my colleagues from the indigenous team, we prepared an indigenous peoples planning framework. Now, this framework is general. Let me mention it, But when we have an activity, like now we are preparing a proposal for an actual activity, then it will be turned into an indigenous people's planning. Help me. Plan. Aha. It will be turned into a plan. Now, my appeal to my team members from the indigenous people and those who represent them is that if you can have time to talk to your members early, identify the points you are interested in, so that when we come to consult you, you mention them clearly and they are turned into a plan. So that plan will have a budget attached to it, and then it can be implemented. It will not solve a lot of all of them, but it will solve whatever those resources are in that proportion. So we also prepared it. We didn't ignore it. And then initiated a design of emission reduction programs, which the commissioner yesterday talked about. Again, on the national context, we also reports on the national environmental and social and gender and cultural circumstances of Uganda. We made a summary on them, including the changes in the environment. The forest cover is changes in the environment, the national strategies to address the drivers, and the environmental and social management frameworks associated with them. Again, when you reach the document, you will see slightly more detail on the risks and benefits, for example, on that page when you reach it. So this is the summary of the methods that we used, that the country used to prepare that summary report. It reports that the summary of information was prepared using documentation of the RED+ process. So the other elements we are mentioning, they were part of the process which we summarized, and they were the source of the information. And then the governance and institutional setup of RED process, namely the use of task forces, technical committees, and national advisory committees supported by the mandated roles of the Ministry of Water and Environment and its partners and other sector agencies. So this is where the information was got from in order to enter it into the document. So this is a section on the information contained on how the country approached the respecting and the addressing of the safeguards. So you remember we mentioned that addressing is including it in the structure of your laws, and then respecting is in implementing what you have mentioned that you have addressed. So this approach now is an affirmation that Uganda used global guidance on RED and other safeguards to identify Uganda's equivalence and gaps therein. And then it is a statement of governance arrangements and processes that are in place to respect and address safeguards, e.g. the adequacy of policies, laws, and regulations, coordination mechanisms, information and communication, and these are contained in the safeguards information system document. So we have a separate document, which is a safeguards information design document, about 100 pages, again, on our website, and also on the website of the UNFCCC. You will Google it. It contains the information which we use to make a summary from. So it has the indicators, the other 7. It also has how the country interpreted them into the themes. Okay. Then a summary of actions we took on the WASO frameworks, and it summarizes the actions taken to respect and address each of them. And it provided the progress on the establishment and operationalization of the safeguards information system. So we have another one. So the other one was a country approach. This is a policy approach. So this one, I will not go deep into it because of the time, but the slides will be shared. So this one now goes into each Cancun element, and then on the east side, it mentions the policies that are applicable. On the eastern side of the east side, it mentions the missing points. This is now an example. So safeguard A was about the policy that affect forestry. So in our submission, we mentioned Uganda has adequate policy, legal and regulatory arrangements for forestry governance. Then in the gaps, enforcement. So when you cook food and nobody eats it, it's very difficult. You can't cook tomorrow. Safeguard B. Uganda has transparent governance, then gap, competing interests, and conflicting laws. They were listed. Safeguard C, on indigenous peoples and their knowledge. The Constitution and subsidiary laws define and recognize rights of IPLCs. Gaps, they do not have clear provisions for sharing of revenue and benefits from trade, such as is in the case of oil and minerals. It is not me, it is in our report. And that report is table 5.1, summary assessment is on page 29 to 32. I'm not manufacturing anything at all. Again, safeguard D, Uganda's provide for identification of relevant stakeholders. This is about stakeholders and participation. Weakness, sometimes reports are very too technical and ordinary people don't understand them. And sometimes they are made inaccessible. So if you prepare an environmental impact assessment and the person who is affected has no access unless he pays some money, so we thought these were gaps. Safeguard E, on natural forests and biological diversity, the country thinks we have the laws, the weakness, the incentives to conserve are lower. So the other move that we mentioned, when a person sees it, he sees the timber. And the timber has a price. Now a panel of muvule is around 150 to 200,000. So when you are keeping that one for carbon dioxide, the man says carbon what? So these incentives are still on the lower side. So safeguard F, this one is on risks of reversal, as you recall. Many of our environmental assessments require that you actually do the assessment of this reversal. But the weakness is that even if you do that assessment, nobody puts it into action. So even these people who have permits for building a factory in places which look like wetlands, they have 70 pages of how to handle it. But now the district environment officer is one man and he's walking on foot. And the factories are 17. You have understood this. And then on safeguard G, Uganda laws have not yet mentioned any requirement on it. This is what this statement means. We have not had any laws which mention the requirement on displacement of activities. What we have are the traditional resettlement, which are slightly different from this one. So this one still needs to be worked on. So this is the conclusion page, and then I will thank you. So in conclusion, the country mentioned that Uganda has good progress towards addressing the safeguards, and there are some gaps. We didn't deny that there are gaps. The country mentioned there are gaps, and they have a timetable for working on it, and even put its own recommendations. Usually recommendations are prepared by somebody from outside, but the country put its own recommendation to undertake appropriate reforms. And the commissioner yesterday mentioned that actually some reforms in the forestry sector are ongoing, starting with the forest policy. And then to strengthen institutional processes and approaches that respect Cancun safeguards, and then to strengthen national capacity for monitoring and reporting on safeguards, the UNFCCC.
What is this for? Thank you for the presentation that you have made. It has been an eye-opening presentation. I think to many of us, it has been an eye-opener. And I would like the audience here present to what should I say? First of all, to thank you and applaud you for the presentation. Please. Xavier is the person that took on the mantle to lead RAID in the very beginning, and he has demonstrated that. You see the confidence with which he speaks. And having spoken to us, definitely he has aroused you to ask questions. There are questions you have prepared for him. And I would like you to ask him questions, if any. And to ask Mr. John Begumana to prepare what Xavier said you will add on the presentation. So let's have questions for Mr. Xavier Mugumya. By show of hands. I would like to go by the columns or rows, wherever, and
what I meant about John was not now. I meant in another session, John will share with us the other technical annex, which helped us now to submit our invoice. It is not now. I was mentioning it that in another time, it is in the same measure that they are sisters. This annex on safeguards, the summary on safeguards, and the annex on the technical part are like sisters in order to get results-based payments. That's what I meant.
okay.
Okay, thank
Now
you.
let's save Mr. Begumana for another session. Let's now address the questions. Mr. Mujumbi.
Thank you, Session Chair. Mine is not necessarily a question, but I'm just trying to add my voice or a recommendation towards, if I could take an instance of safeguard E that you have just presented. There's the recommendation that there are not adequate economic incentive, and you gave the example of Muvule. I'm looking at it from the other side. Maybe outside this boardroom and maybe within the boardroom today, there has been a lot of question about a lot of money being put to the Ministry of Water and Environment, but the results not coming out very clearly at some point. And the suggestion that has always been put across to curb issues of, let's say, looking at Muvule as money, but not in terms of climate change effects. We have always been told that we should have very good mindset change, or we should prepare for good mindset change, attitude and behavioral change, as some of the other recommendations. Instead of looking at it from the quantitative, we should also look at it from the other qualitative side. That's just an addition to what's some of those recommendations as per your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mujumbi. Can we have another contribution from this row? If not, take the mic to Mr. Olgenbe.
Thank you very much, presenter. Everybody, it was a very good presentation. I'm going to think out of the box, but from a context of my mandate. One, on the section of national context, we talked of inadequacies. I'll just use the National Forest Authority, which is a corporate member of UFA. on all their pages and walls, their first point of reference is that they operate professionally. In other words, their core value is professionalism. Now, in the entire presentation here, is professionalism just assumed, or there would be need to also mention it possibly as a gap, as I'll show in the next 2 points. Then the other point, the second point, in our congregation here, we present a technical term, PPP, public-private partnership. Now in these presentations, we have government and non-government. Can't we highlight those areas where now our congregation or this audience can participate in the presentations when they are being implemented? Because now, for example, the presenter has mentioned different budgets. One, they started with 500 and they are continuing. Then where do we fit? Can we be helped? And then the last point, sir, is under safeguards. When we talk of summary assessment of Uganda against Cancun safeguards, this is an area where, as you were talking of gaps, now to talk for our own institution or mandate, professionalism should be cited somewhere. Thank you very much, sir. Lack of professionalism, or need to strengthen professionalism. There are so many areas, ways that we can mention it simply, but then assist us all to become better professionals. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Where were you? You are absent, but present. Okay, we will come to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Xavier, for the presentation. Since yesterday, I've been waiting for to see the anticipated risks that result from implementing RED Plus activities. And I actually thought they were going to be in this part of summary of information. I have not seen the anticipated risks and the planned actions in line with safeguards. Thank you.
Just know that this presentation is a presentation of what we presented. He's not, okay, I'll leave him to answer the question, sorry. Bring the microphone here for Mr. Ecotrust to, there is a burning issue he wants to ask.
Thank you so much, Gaston. Actually, it's not even a burning issue. And maybe not even a question, but a comment, but arising from the presentation. Xavier was talking about, it was safeguard F, and the gap, if I recall, was, is it poor or weak enforcement of the existing policies, laws, and regulations? And my comment is that in most of the meetings that I have attended, this issue keeps coming up of weak enforcement every time, in every meeting. It is even here. And it is a very serious issue, a safeguard F. And I'm asking the room, not even Xavier, what are we going to do about this issue of weak enforcement? And shall we be able to, I mean, we are making these commitments, but how are we going to manage this kind of issue? Because it appears to be an issue that has been on for quite a long time and may continue probably. Thank you.
As you have asked us to think about it, you also, it is a difficult question. You also are part of us. Therefore, you also supposed to come up with what we shall do in addressing the question of law enforcement. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Xavier, for your presentation. To such a good presentation. My concern is about the private sector. How does private sector fit into this Red Plus? And how does the private forest owners benefit from this initiative? Thank you.
Private sector involvement and engagement. How do we benefit? Monday?
Very well. I would still thank the world champion, the world consultant, Xavier. Thank you for the good job, and I say long live. As my brother already asked on private sector, I am asking what is in the plan for the royalties of the indigenous people now that the Benes left Mount Elgon Forest, the Batwa left Ichuya, Burundi, Impenetrable, and what have you? What is it in the plan, and how do we then benefit? Are we going to receive in cash, in kind, in terms of communities, corporate social responsibilities? What is it? Let it come out clearly. Even as you let it come clearly on the section of the indigenous people. And I'm asking you, a consultant, what is that clear definition for the indigenous people? Because we seem the existing definition is creating a space for many to become indigenous. Even those who are already indigenous, they want to be more indigenous, and it is even creating space that we are at risk of losing the indigenous in this country. Guide us. Can we formulate even in this meeting, and we make a proposal? If there is another level that we take to for approval, take us through. Thank you very much.
Mr. Xavier, the question is, we are becoming more of indigenous people. How do we address it? Eh? Yes, Hamba.
Yes, thank you so much. Mr. Xavier, I think in your presentation, you looked at some of the safeguards, and in a way you are trying to avoid participation. But I think at the level of enforcement, what's usually the challenge is meaningful engagement. Sometimes we say participation, but it's usually passive. So I think in respecting and in promoting the representation of different individuals at that level, people we call marginalized groups, I think we leave them at the level of being excluded, but they make numbers. That's what we call participation many times. But meaningfully do not contribute to either the challenges or the recommendations, and that's what is actually disturbing us. So I think in the level of, for us to address issues with accountability or social accountability, transparency, and the rest, meaningful engagement is what we need to emphasize. I think the other things will address lack of information, ignorance, and all the rest. Thank you so much.
Any other question? We are not performing well in terms of time. Therefore, we will stop the questions there, and we will allow an opportunity to Mr. Xavier Mugumi and Nyindo to respond to those questions. There are quite many. If you forget one, I will review. Xavier.
Thank you. If I could start with the last one from the gentleman. So again, I would like to give a caveat. I was sharing as a reporter the country report summarizing what we are doing with terms of respecting and addressing the safeguards. I also want to put another caveat and mention that I've presented 13 slides, but actually the document is 44 pages. So I am encouraging members to Google it. It is Googleable, it is publicly available, to visit it and then look at how we presented our points. And directly on participation, all effort was put to include as many stakeholder categories as possible. However, we were short of having a referendum. What the universal participation is actually like a referendum. But even a referendum, you can challenge it because under 18s would not be able to participate in it. So that is part of the limitation. I will give a direct example. When we are preparing the proposal, gentlemen, for the other elements that we have mentioned, our budget was about 15 million. And the participation and consultation was prepared by my colleague there. Yes, the budget was about 6 million. We requested him to prepare it for us. It was about half of the budget was about participation and consultation. Now, when we received the support, 3/4 went to the technical points. About a quarter went to participation and consultation. So, and sometimes when we take our points to our ministries of finance, wherever they are located in the whole world, participation and consultation is called soft. It is not a mutaimbwa, it is not a bag of cement, it is not a kilo of something that you procure. It is a circular activity. A meeting today, a meeting tomorrow, a meeting the day after. People don't know how it is that it is building a nation. So I want us to work together to increase resources for participation, but also to increase more time that can be allowed for forward and backwards in consultations. But the chance we have, colleague, is that we are preparing our second summary. And so my colleague has now taken the notes of the points that he will look at when preparing our second summary. Has taken most of the time for the other questions, so I will rush through them. On the benefits for indigenous peoples, again, this was a summary report, but a full report of benefit sharing was prepared, and it is now during the implementation that I want to encourage you to participate when we reach out to you that we are preparing an invoice. I talked to you yesterday and my commissioner mentioned that we are preparing an invoice to submit for payment, but when we come to you, be prepared so that we can see how best to use the proceeds of this invoice. Allow me to be very quick. Again, my colleague also from EcoTrust, we take this point as part of the food for thought. And since we are preparing our next summary, we could have a paragraph when we share with you to put in a paragraph, a solution might come from you. But one of the ways that we use to solve this one is that the resources you provide, we use the monitoring approaches to make sure that they are attributed as maximally as possible. There are factors you don't control when your resources are limited. So your resources should be accounted for such that the attribution allows for solving for the enforcement component. If you didn't pay for the district forest officer to measure the muvule, that muvule was cut without being measured. But if you pay for the forest officer to measure the muvule and he doesn't measure it, that's where now you will say, please, could you refund the other fuel? But if you do, most likely he will measure it. For example, the team you are supporting, the global benefits, the support you give them reaches them, and the agreement, the small plans you make with the farmers are actually implemented. More than 80%. You can look at your reports, and that is how it is linked. Quickly, led the praise. So the anticipated risks and associated benefits, actually the table is there. I didn't just put it in, but in that summary, we have a full table, which was picked from the CESA and ESMF. It is part of it is in that big document. And in my notes, I was only referring it to as just a pointer, but it is, we did them. It was prepared. It is also mentioned in the summary of information. And my colleague Titus? Yes, sir. The private sector, for example, we have several approaches that the private sector are participating in. So under the climate change mechanism, private sector are submitting their interests directly. Even you have seen some of them come directly to your office to participate. And once they are vetted, they will be participating as direct projects, which will be registered under the different standards. Now, under this RED Plus, even the application that the country is making for ART and trees, the commissioner yesterday mentioned that an entity can choose to work with government in the fulfilling of the requirements for art investments. And so also the procedure is available, both from the standard point of view and also from the country's PPP approach. And that PPP, if it can go to you, David, that's how it comes in. So there are types of that PPP that it will come in, that an entity will make its interest to government to participate in an activity like RED Plus, and then government will work with that entity. And so that procedure does exist. And so if I could also go to an individual. So an individual's participation will take several forms as well. We have individuals, for example, whom EcoTrust supports. They are ordinary farmers. They accepted and signed participation agreements with EcoTrust, and they received and planted and managed the trees, but they also make a plan for their livelihoods alongside the conservation of those trees. We have that approach. But we have the approach for my colleague, for example, in Utga, where the individual entities, I am using entities like companies and in big individuals who actually prepare individual carbon projects using plantations. When I was an officer in NFA, I was responsible for 5 of those plantations as a coordinator, but they were being implemented directly through our system. Those were called clean development mechanism plantations. So those are possibilities. Now, when you are a very small holder, the cost of establishing a carbon project is high, that you need to be aggregated the way we do in commodities. So a commodity dealer like a maize dealer works with several farmers, aggregates the individual maize, and then bags it and stores it, cleans it until it passes the exam, and he supplies it. The same way, that's the same approach that carbon can work. As an individual, it is very hard for an individual to prepare the background and register them. Bear with me, I'm remaining with 1 point or 2. So, Mr. Walugembe, professionalism here is actually assumed. There's a section which were called governance. That whole section, the country mentioned that it had significant progress in the governance arrangements that support local individuals who are their best in a professional way. However, your point can come in that you keep participating in an ask so that we don't lose that leg. But that word professionalism is not mentioned, it is actually assumed. It is like we don't mention how many people were paid during the meeting. It is assumed that people were supported during the meeting. Usually that's sometimes it is inevitable, but that's how it comes in. But we encourage you that if don't go away, we'll keep coming until we receive the other components. Because the next stage now we are preparing a proposal. Now, if there is something missing about supporting our technical team, we could include a line. So that's how this thing works. Okay. my colleague, Mr. DFO, your point, I think, was guidance, and it is what we are all aspiring for. If we could change the behaviors of people so that they see their movulatory as part of supporting themselves, that would be the best. But we are at different stages of economy. Sometimes it is easier to convert a banana branch into cash as compared with waiting to see if it will help the environment. That's the limitation, but we are all working towards that arrangement. And if incentives, and that's how countries were requesting that if incentives were all positive, then our policies would match them. So yes, we still need those incentives. I think the others we can talk while we are taking coffee. And I thank you very much for the opportunity. Okay, I didn't talk about more indigeneity, but about the benefit sharing I mentioned that when we are preparing our invoice, I use the word invoice because it's very easy to understand. Our proposal is like an invoice. You be with us and we prepare to see how we'll share the proceeds. Then on indigeneity, the Ministry of Water and Environment works with the department responsible for defining indigeneity in our country, in this case, our Ministry of Gender, to make sure that if there is a proposal, that proposal is received and considered. So we don't work alone. So we invite you to prepare and work with the Ministry of Gender so that we can have anything that either stops people becoming more indigenous or encourages them to become more indigenous. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, this session has come to an end, and I would like you to join your hands and thank Xavier Mugume. And since we have earned ourselves a break, I invite you to tea outside, and you take about 40 minutes and come back. We had this, I think we prayed a lot in the morning. This prayer covers the tea as well. Thank you. We go for tea.
Forestry Authority, but we shall get the appropriate and we adjust. So the RED Plus framework is designed to align with the climate, international climate agreements, particularly the Paris Agreement, which calls for countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also to enhance carbon stocks through sustainable forest management practices. So there are a lot of things which have been done in line with RED Plus, as it has been presented since yesterday. And as of 2021, there were very many activities which were ongoing about RED Plus, and we shall see the details as we move forward. Institutional arrangements, Ministry of Water and Environment takes the lead, but there are other institutions, your ministry, the NEMA, the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Culture, and others. They are all important as far as RED Plus is concerned. The policy laws and regulations, I captured this from the first summary, but I know it is an area which we are going to have to adjust. It doesn't cover much. So when we talk about the third section, which is Uganda's national circumstances and approach to RED, the context gives the key frameworks, UNFCCC, FCPF, GCF somewhere, World Bank, and all the others have been a basis. But also important to note is Uganda's movement towards art trees is also very important as we report. So the circumstances are informed by Uganda's key initiatives related to those frameworks. So we also note that Uganda has also presented a concept note, as was talked about yesterday, to art trees and then Leaf Coalition, and those proposals were supported by UN RED and the affiliated UN institutions. But important to note that there is a high rate of deforestation. There are diverse ecosystems, socio-economic challenges, and all these are important to keep in our mind as we prepare the second summary of information. First, climate change in Uganda, basically, which is key in elaborating given Uganda's drive towards RED Plus. Mainly, we focus on the Uganda climate change policy, and which provides a guiding framework for the country's climate change response for various sectors. So this is important because it is the building framework on which RED is even anchored. The other one is Uganda's nationally determined contribution, which is Uganda's commitment towards climate change and carbon reduction, emission reductions. This was updated, and also it increased Uganda's commitment, what is required to be done by each entity and everyone as far as attaining this nationally determined contribution is concerned. The other one is we have a section about the design and implementation of RED Plus, and basically based on the fact that the forest cover is dwindling, and the contribution of forests, and in as far as annual carbon sequestration is concerned, and all these are forming a basis to our summary of information. So the next section, of course, this gives some frameworks which have been handled. The next section talks about Uganda's progress on RED+, beginning since the National RED+ Strategy and Action Plan was worked on, was launched, and the various forestation and reforestation programs which are aimed at increasing forest cover. This shows what has been done from the year 2000. 2000 was the beginning of awareness and research. 2008 marked the engagement with RED+. 2010 was the, I don't think this is correct. It is not necessarily correct. And then this we need to clarify. Okay, so we talk about progress of Uganda's engagement with earth trees. As we have said, the concept was submitted in 2019, and along the way, the registration, the status now is that the development of trees registration document is ongoing. Stakeholder consultation has been ongoing. Development of trees monitoring report, again, until it is approved. And then the development of the plan of conformance is ongoing, but all of these are based on consultation, stakeholder consultation, and ensuring that everybody moves along, which is very important. So, regards national and international policies, it is based on stakeholder engagement, it is based on capacity building, and then establishing monitoring mechanisms and addressing gender considerations. Number 6 is collaboration with international partners, which has done a lot towards Uganda's journey. The key sustainable forest interventions which have been mentioned, one, collaborative forest management. The model was launched with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Netherlands, and basically it seeks to see how local communities affected by forests, how the local people can actively participate in doing part of the work of safeguarding the forests and ensuring sustainability. Agroforestry practices, then the GCF concept note, which has been talked about, and then the other is the forest certification scheme, which has been adopted by the country, and this will provide a framework for assessing and certifying forests based on environmental, social, and economic criteria, and this will be relevant to RED+. Okay, so are we moving very fast? Respecting RED+ safeguards. This is the main section of this. I mean, all sections are important, but this is the biggest section as far as this report is concerned. It is building on the progress, as we have said, of the first summary of information, and it is structured in 4 ways. The first one is the description of Uganda's the description of Uganda's understanding of a specific safeguard, because maybe the way it is written may not be the way it is adopted in Uganda, the way it is picked. So we have to emphasize that. The second one is the safeguard theme, a breakdown of those elements which are part of the safeguards, as we have seen, the 16 themes. The other one is the legal policy and regulatory framework as far as these each of these themes is concerned. The other one is the institutional framework. And then last is what has been done. Now, you have to be careful about this outcome. It may be slightly different from the way we have been using that term, but we shall see as we move. What has been done in line with each of these themes in the country? What have we achieved? Which may be enough or not enough to qualify it to be registered as an outcome in the other documents which we have been talking about. Okay, so we go to safeguard A, which says that actions complement or are consistent with the objectives of national forestry programs and relevant international conventions and relevant ratified conventions and agreements. This requires that Uganda implements REDD+ activity or intervention in compliance with national forest programs and consistent with the relevant treaties. And that is what we have based on. And that is what all the other documents are based on. So the first theme is to do with showing that the action is complement or are consistent with the relevant objectives of national forestry programs. What is the key legal, policy, and regulatory framework as far as this is concerned? We have agreed, since we joined here, everybody notes that Uganda has a comprehensive legal and policy framework, and we are told that we should not bother with it. We should only bother with implementation. So again, the legal section also emphasizes that, but it highlights the key policies, the key laws. There are many others, but the key ones which must appear in this summary of information are highlighted. They are highlighted. The Uganda Forest Policy, Climate Change Policy, updated nationally determined contributions, National Biodiversity Strategy, and the Act. And specifically for this report, we should show whether there has been any change in any of these. If there has been any review, any update, we note it. Actually, if you get to know anything which is being reviewed, which may be relevant to REDD+, please tell us so that we include it in this section. The National Climate Change Act came into force during the reporting period, because we are saying the reporting period is January 1st, 2021. So this one came into force. It may not appear in the first summary of information. So it has to appear here. There was an amendment, or is it ongoing, of the National Forest and Tree Planting Act. The REDD+ strategy was updated as well to include some components which are listed. The National Forest Policy, Uganda's second National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan, in as far as its alignment with the global framework is concerned. And then part 2 of this safeguard, we said we shall talk about the institutional framework. We highlight, is there any change? Yes, I know there are some changes. Some of them may not have been captured here, but definitely. Still, Ministry of Water, NFA, UA, district local governments have mandates which are aligned with the REDD+ implementation, in addition to others like MAIF, Ministry of Energy, Gender, Ministry of Lands, all those have mandates. Lands is missing. We need to note that what may have changed, we are talking about a period up to the end of 2024, and there was a planned rationalization of agencies. what is the state of NFA now? Is it going to water? It's coming to water, but we shall not include it during the period ending 2024. We shall also note that it is being done. Is it going to help? We need to keep track of that. Uganda National Climate Change Advisory Committee, I think during that period, it was strengthened and in a way, given a mandate also as well to get representation from REDD+, isn't it? So in that case, that is something which is important for the reporting period we are talking about. If the Forest Sector Support Department ends up housing NFA, then we shall have advantages related to managing operations in the same unit, and also lose the benefits which would have been associated with having a specialized entity dealing with something. So it depends on how we are going to look at it. Outcomes, again, we are talking about the fact that the design of REDD+ action is consistent and complements the objectives, policies, and though Uganda has not yet actually implemented much of REDD+, but we are sure that the agenda of REDD+ has been integrated in Uganda, was integrated in the 3rd National Development Plan. We are more comfortable in the 4th National Development Plan, but it doesn't fall within this area. But there was a National Green Growth Strategy as well, and all those, I think, were aligned with the agenda of REDD+. Theme 2, which is consistency of objectives of relevant international conventions and agreements. Again, about 14 international treaties, conventions have been ratified by Uganda, and they are given. And then the other thing is Uganda updated its nationally determined contribution, which is relevant to those international conventions and treaties. National diversity, again, is important. Then the institutional framework, these institutions which are mandated to deal with the ratified conventions and agreements have also been listed. Are they strong enough? Are they able to address the agenda of those conventions? We should state it. And if there is any change which has been done in that respect, we should also note it. So among you members, if there is anyone who knows what is changing in relation to a particular convention, please help us in that respect. Okay, so safeguard B, about the rights of access to information, accountability, justice, gender equality, land tenure, and fair distribution of benefits. The first theme was to do with the respect, protection, and fulfillment of rights of access to information. Where do we fall as far as the legal and regulatory framework is concerned? I think access to information is enshrined in the Constitution, and there are many acts, relevant laws and regulations which are in place to ensure that to promote access to information from any public bodies. Of course, these ones have some exceptions, as we have said before. Important to notice is that in the Access to Information Act of 2005, Section 5, subsection 1, every citizen has a right to access information and records in the possession of the state or any public body, except where the release of this information is likely to jeopardize national sovereignty or security or interfere with state operations.
That is this a big limitation as far as Red Plus is concerned? Maybe not as much of a limitation. It also provides the procedure for accessing this information and records. The National Forestry and Tree Planting Act also provides specific information access. It addresses issues related to discrimination, to the dissemination and the distribution of information on aspects related to forestry and forest-related activities. And there are websites which are highlighted, which are accessible. Again, in terms of the institutional framework, we are noting that as Xavier did continue to encourage everybody that the first summary of information on safeguards is available. There is a hotline which is dedicated to tackle Red Plus activity. Is it active? And then a landline. So all these, the Ministry of Water is hosting this. So they are important in as far as access to information is concerned. Is there any other improvement as far as access to information is concerned? We need to integrate this. What was done during the period, feedback and grievance redress mechanism was updated, and it is available on the website, which is indicated. Ministry of Water developed a dedicated communication, education, and awareness strategy. It has, during which is for this period, and I think this is important for the ministry to deal with outsiders and to avail the relevant information to stakeholders. Okay. In addition, and very, very important, though we need additional information, we note that several public consultations, including the ones which may be like this one, were conducted. We could even put pictures if possible, but we can add evidence and a number of people who attended. They disaggregate them according to their interests to show that information indeed has been shared with stakeholders. There has been sensitizations, there have been trainings. Every time we receive information, explanation about the key, the Red Plus principles, concepts, and they had to understand concepts. And all this is about sharing, information sharing, I guess. Okay, anything else which could have been done, but we need to, if it is possible, we could access the information, the details of what has been done during the period, and then we include it. The other theme is promote transparency, prevention of corruption, including the promotion of anti-corruption measures. Again, under the legal policy and regulatory framework, we know that Uganda has established measures to reduce corruption and promote accountability and good governance. There are offices that like offices of Inspector General of Government. I mean, here we could even be focusing on the act which brings that office into place. We talk about accountability framework, Parliament, PAC, and all these institutions. How are they brought into place, and what is their mandate? Is this sufficient to ensure that there is accountability, transparency, and prevention of corruption? We need to look at those laws. Institutional framework. Again, here we should be talking about the, I think there was a, this one was placed and not replaced, I think. but we should be talking about the institutions, the Office of the Inspector General of Government, the Office of the Auditor General, how the Parliament handles, and how institutions have auditing done and controls. All these are important, and reporting especially, they are important in supporting RED+ activity. Okay. We could do, yesterday we were supposed to have a session with Nathan, and he said he was going to handle some issue to do with the complaints which have been registered. Now, in this report, I think we could, in order to show that our institutions, our laws, our policies, our regulations, our plan, our strategy is working, we could try and populate this to show the issues which have been received. Yes, we say we have a mechanism for receiving and resolving issues. How many have been received? How many have been resolved? If we do not have that information, we shall delete the table. No problem. The third theme under Safeguard B, respect, protect, and fulfill land tenure rights. Again, the laws are in place to recognize customary freehold, mile, and leasehold ownership and rights. And these are reinforced, these are in the Constitution, and they are reinforced by the Land Act and land regulations. Also, the National Forestry and Tree Planting Act has some obligations it places on the minister in as far as the transfer of management of community forests to the government is concerned. We need to be keen on that. The Wildlife Act is also in place. So institutions, key institutions, Land Commission, Ministry of Lands, district land boards, land committees, and other institutions are mandated by the different laws in order to manage that, to ensure that the rights of access to land are entered. In terms of outcomes, the RED Environment Social Management Framework is in place. The mandate of NFA in as far as managing the existing central forest reserves is concerned. And the RED+ has undertaken various stakeholder engagements, and the safeguards team should also give us the information which has taken place, which we would have captured in the previous table. And then those will show us how far we have gone as we were as far as observing and respecting these safeguards is concerned. Theme 4 under Safeguard B, respect, protect, and fulfill access to justice. The Constitution, the Land Act, the Registration of Title Act, customary land laws, and all the other support laws are in place, and they ensure, they establish institutions, they establish frameworks within which the access to justice should be achieved. Judicature Act is missing. Wildlife Act is also important. We have established courts which are important in the feedback and grievance redress mechanism in relation to RED+. And these, we are looking at them in terms of the legislation, the institutions, the mandate. So, under community or local level, we have laws like the Local Council Courts Act, we have the Land Act, we have the different institutions, local council courts, sub-county land tribunals, urban land tribunals. We have mediators, including religious, political, and traditional leaders, district officials, the district land tribunals, and all these have their mandates clearly elaborated. Is this enough? Is there a gap? We have sector specific. The sector within which RED operates, does it have a law which will enable grievance redress? We are saying there is the National Environment Act, which establishes the Environmental Tribunal. Now, again, under national, we looked at local, we have looked at sector, we have looked at national, we have magistrate courts, we have arbitration and conciliation, we have the constitution, we have Judicature Act, and all these different institutions, each with mandates which we have tried to identify and jurisdiction over some issues related to RED plus grievances. Institutional framework, again, land commission, the district land board, land committees, ministries, NEMA, and all those district offices, sorry. So all those are institutions which are relevant. We need IT support. It is not responding. It is not responding. Okay. So we can look at safeguard C, which requires respect for the knowledge and rights of indigenous peoples and members of local communities by taking into account relevant international obligations, national circumstances, and laws, noting that the UN General Assembly has adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So the themes, the first theme is to identify indigenous peoples and local communities or equivalent. Can I skip this? Because it is the sticky area, which we know we have not been able. Yeah, but of course, the Constitution, the Land Act, the Registration of Titles Act, Customary law, they recognize the different types of land. Is this a repetition? Equal Opportunities Act talks about what the Constitution provides as far as the rights of indigenous peoples is concerned, and also emphasizes that the Equal Opportunities Act prescribes the policies which should be adhered to, the laws and plans which should be adhered to in order to ensure that there are equal opportunities and affirmative actions in favor of marginalized groups, and that is properly provided. Wildlife Act has guidelines on sustainable access of communities, neighboring conservation areas, and the institution is National Forestry Authority, Uganda Wildlife Authority, NEMA, Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Water, and others. We note that they have been talking about frameworks and elaborated that these frameworks will be used when activity commences. They will be made specific to the target interventions which will be undertaken, but we need to note that the Ministry of Water has an Uganda Indigenous Peoples Planning Framework, which are available. They are available on the website, and these should be accessed. And some of the issues which the indigenous peoples may have, they may actually initiate a process of updating or review of these frameworks in order to integrate the specific issues. Respect to traditional knowledge, I think we are, because as somebody did note, this work started in January, more or less, and it is almost getting complete, but we are still in January. So there are some themes which we have not yet clearly addressed, but this presentation aims to show what we are doing with each safeguard, what we are doing with each theme. And I think what has been presented now should be able to, the other one, I said there is a section which will be an overview of the safeguard information system. And then the last bit will be dealing with stakeholder engagement. And this stakeholder engagement is a specific section which shows that during the process of preparing this summary of information, stakeholders have actually given input. It is not stakeholder engagement in any other respect, it is the comment. Now, this section cannot be populated now because you have not yet given a comment, but like tomorrow, if you looked at this section, you would find that it has a lot of comments. And thank you very much. This is how far we've gone. But as I requested from the start, you should say no, we should take this other direction. You should say no, this section is not representative. You should say no, there is something which is missing, and that way you participate in this summary of information. And as I said, during the time when they are preparing the third, there will be very few comments about the adequacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Albert. I think you will need to sit here so that you receive the comments, if you don't mind. As Albert has indicated, he's interested in comments or contributions that will make the document a final one and a complete one. Therefore, I see hands coming up. I see Hamba, I see Mr. Mjumbi. I will start with Mr. Mjumbi before I proceed to Hamba.
Mine is, I think, a contribution or a comment either way. I realized it when you were talking about grievance redress mechanisms for the safeguards.
The last one is actually in general about urban developing in terms of the new urban agenda, because that's where the Uganda urban policy was developed, then followed by the Physical Development Act that was launched last year. So we need to know how it speaks to the different processes leading to either deforestation or afforestation. I thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Walimbo.
It's just a rejoinder to Hambers. Yeah, like I stated, we are seeing a lot of course urban development. The rate of growth, I think, annually is over 6%. If you check around most of the areas, urbanizing. One, some are experiencing a huge loss of forest area. Others, like I think Kampala, you see people are trying to plant trees, different types, ornamental and so on. Now, the relevance, my issues around how the red process can be, tapped into to improve urban forestry. Because it's microforest. So yeah, because urban areas are a big driving factor for deforestation in the rural areas or adjacent areas. That's one thing you need to note. But also we need to understand that some urban areas actually are even more forested than some of the rural areas. You check the case of, if you go to Bugorobi area, you go to Kororo, there's a higher forest cover than even in most of the surrounding areas. Yeah. I just wanted to make a rejoinder on Hambers.
Thank you very much. In the presentation, something stood out for me, and consultant did not complete that particular section. He was mentioning an equivalent for indigenous person. And so I and Charles and the Patwa and the indigenous, we will need a better clarification. What is this equivalent? Yeah.
I think we shouldn't be asking questions, we should be guiding the document. Yes. What guidance would you need here to? This is it is our document as a group. We don't want the document to go out and then you start complaining from out there when you shouldn't be complaining. Now, guide us on, maybe we need to talk between you and Charles and you agree on the language you should be using. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that is the spirit within which this document has been presented. And Charles is here to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to get some concern from the document. In the institutional framework, I am seeing one ministry and its regulatory frameworks a bit silent. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development is doing a lot of environmental and hazardous challenges in Karamoja. I feel we need to have a lens into including how it can also play a good role in supporting this strategy of RED+. Thank you.
Kindly help us to talk about the issue he has raised.
Now,
the indigenous people.
In the presentation of the document, if you look at how the document has been structured, the information of the institutional frameworks has been cited strictly from the Constitution. If you look at the footnote, we mentioned yesterday that as at 1st February 1926, Uganda in Annex 3 gives, how many by now? 56? It used to be 54. It gives 56 not indigenous people. They describe it as indigenous and ethical communities. Now, if you look at the language of negotiations, right from this red international standard and the rest, it gives a room for nations to rely on their national circumstances. I think this is the legal part that we need to have had a debate over. And one of it is, let me stand. One of it is the Red Plus philosophy is something that is globally driven from top to bottom approaches to countries. And the inclusion of indigenous people was the first to have been debated. And the addition of local communities was also a long way to debate about it, because at global level, entire architecture of debates, you will find that even at World Bank, we had to secure the seats for at least 2 indigenous representatives globally. At every board, including the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, including the UN RED. Now, when we come to the word of definition, we are always thrown into what we call national circumstances. How I wish Mr. Bachika Robert, if he was here. Yes. I'd been battling about this thing with our former minister, Jessica Erio. She was a minister for environment. We could meet in Germany and she tells us, who is more indigenous than other Ugandans? But we said, our submission is that if you look at the architecture of the global formation of all these things, right from the Rio Convention of 1992, you will see to it that the issue of all these conventions addresses issues to deal with historical injustices. And one of it has been the level at which countries have classified themselves, and the nature at which even we make our constitutions. Our constitutions are just colonial driven. They say do this, but make sure it has international what? International standards. And you will find that the lens at which this has been spread to involve the indigenous people and local communities, the element of certain conventions addressing only traditional knowledge and associated issues to deal with their practices. In the Convention of Biological Diversity, you take Article 8J. Some countries work with World Intellectual Property Organization to make sure that if research is done and traditional knowledge has never, like for instance, local hubs. We had a discussion with, who's this expert of ours who made this COVIDX? COVIDX was picked from Mount Napak. We call it Abuach. He has been our field officer for long. in Karamoja. We call it Abwach. Doesn't grow from Moroto, Morungole, or somewhere. And was picked. Then someone came and said, did he take the consent of all these people? They come and say, you see, WIPO addresses the issue of the intellectual property rights. Have your traditional healers been consulted? Who goes to that debate? For us, ours is, does it cure? And being indigenous in very many aspects cannot have a proper definition unless if we open up this debate for another 5 years. Another 5 years. The last place I never defined the word indigenous people was the 25th session of environment ministers in Nairobi Union. That was 2009. And it was Mwai Kibaki who was a president. Then Jess Kerry was telling me, top of you come. You mentioned the other word. I agree with you this time. Now our minister is not there. The issue of being indigenous or not indigenous. You can be a local community or you can be the original holder of a land. I can be an indigenous person. But if she comes possibly to buy, I can give you that example, to buy a plot in Karamoja and you stay around there. Can't you be involved under a local community? You can become local in one way or the other. That locality brings you the inclusion and the participation for all these things. Other debates, even if we stay there for 2 years, we shall not leave the microphone. Thank you.
There is another contribution from Mr. Walgembe. I hope you have captured the views and opinions of Charles, together with the mandate on indigenous people and their inclusion in the document. Yes, Mr. Walgembe.
Thank you very much. Have a seat. Thank you very much to all the presenters. I'll start where we stopped, and that was on professionalism. At least I was happy to know that it's just assumed, and that's the contribution that's the first contribution I want to provide. In terms of professionalism, we start with mapping technical specialties, and FAO lists over 40, 50 specialties in forestry. Let's come down home. In Uganda, we have the National Forestry Authority, as we've already said, has professionalism as its core value under the able leadership of FSSD. And in terms of breeding, we had only 2 people, Madame Rachel Musoke, a former commissioner, and Mr. Esego, former director. They've both retired. Now that's clearly a gap. If we go to some healing, we have people like Kagoro, we have the late Odokonyero. Those are now absent skills. Even Mr. Mugumya there, sorry to say, but he has very, very sophisticated skills, which if there was a system of grabbing them back in the system, it would be really a gap filled properly. So this leads me to the second point, that maybe even for NGOs, now we're told for us, our mandate is to bring out the NGO side. We could also map our specialties. So all of us here, each one has some attribute which turns it into a specialty. Meaning then there we could easily identify gaps in those specialties and then work out a framework for strengthening those specialties, which then would contribute to sustainable forest management. 3, now back to the presentation. When we go to stakeholder engagement, I think emphasis was on the process. That needs clarification. When you just say the process, it's not good enough for us to understand or appreciate. Then institutional arrangements comes in. One of the items that brought civil society on board was there's a time there was a presentation somewhere abroad, and all the participants were government. So actually that team was sent back and said, we cannot proceed if you don't have civil society. And that's how now this idea of civil society participation came in. But now if you look at our document, this government, you are, NEMA, we think we need to bring out also the role of NGOs, which leads to this other point. Can't we also have a section where civil society and private sector, now like the timber gentleman here has just mentioned, where also our benefit sharing comes in the final output, so that you can easily say, okay, much as we participated in the meetings that's incepted this, but also in the outcome, we should be able to say, but now in the outcome, where are we? So in that way, it strengthens the whole point. Lastly, agroforestry. I thought we just touched agroforestry. Agroforestry is another area. The way it's mentioned there, it is very, very mentioned slightly, but it needs more strengthening. We have a strategy. There's no home for agroforestry because Zafori says it's not its home in principle, but we want a home in the government body, etc., etc. So maybe that could also, if that is strengthened again, it would improve the points that we are raising here. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the contribution. I have an announcement here to make. It is to all of us. Colleagues, you registered at the secretariat when you are coming. Probably you registered well not knowing what the reimbursement mechanism will be followed. We will use we will reimburse transport and other dues using mobile telephone number. If you have registered there with a telephone number which is not in your names, I repeat, if you registered a telephone number that is not in your names, please walk back to the secretariat and have it sorted. Am I clear? Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I proceed? Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. My contribution would be, can we do some kind of risk analysis? Maybe introduce a section, subsection, whatever you call it. We do a risk analysis and then maybe mitigation, and maybe it will be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are the comments or contributions that you had. Maybe Albert, you should respond to people's how you perceive the contributions, and then we'll move on. Albert.
Thank you very much. Thank you for these comments. If they are addressed, they will put our second summary of information and improve the state really. As I did note, that it is the comments are going to inform our processes moving from this point, and then they will be captured as much as possible. To begin with, Mr. Mujumbi talks about the National Physical Planning Act. Definitely, we are going to include that if it falls within the reporting period. Risk analysis again, which he talks about, and mitigations. This I can combine with somebody who talked about land use, and those were clearly addressed, I think, in the first summary of information. They are in a better detail in the first summary of information, and therefore we shall leverage that. We shall include it in the section which talks about Uganda's circumstance. Now, that also, our circumstances is very, very important. Our national circumstances, Uganda's national circumstances, is going to be important in the way we present this summary of information. Generally, some comments, yes, we acknowledge them, but we have nothing to do about it. Comments like the definition of indigenous peoples. To change that, you will have to change the constitution, because it is in the constitution. We cannot have this summary of information and we leave the section, we leave, everything is going to be anchored. We get a starting point from the constitution, and that is as much as the constitution can do. I think the people who are working on the constitution, they focused mainly on the last pieces of land which were added to Uganda. You know, around that time, there were some changes. Part was captured, was taken by Kenya, and then we picked some other part. And then the definition, I think, focused on when Uganda became Uganda the way it is now, by boundary. But otherwise, if you to go by the definition, you will know that the difference between Kisoro and the difference is the line which was drawn by the Muzungu. You'll find that part of your family is the other side. You go to the mountains, the hills, part of the family will be the other side. But the definition, I think, aimed at capturing what was in this place at that time. And they defined indigenous person. Here where we are looking at indigenous peoples and so on, in relation to RED plus, we try to augment it by capturing from the other acts which are in place to try and get a better definition, I think. Okay, revenue sharing, as I said, there are some issues which are sticky, which issues to do with revenue sharing must be clearly elaborated in the summary of information. We are going to attempt to include, based on the existing frameworks, and then we see what, of course, if nothing much has been done in the area of revenue sharing, then it doesn't make sense for us to recast the framework, because the framework is in place anyway. We can capture it in the document, saying that the framework is also in place. But if the point comes where there is some revenue which is received and it has to be shared, then there will be issues, and those issues will also be resolved. And then the summary of information in the future will be capturing Uganda's capacity in recognizing those issues and resolving the issues. But as of now, we may end up acknowledging that there is a framework in place, especially for the reporting period. Culture, language differences, and I was looking at the gentleman who is walking outside there. I hope I've not ambushed you, but yesterday you presented the plan of conformance. These differences should, if we are to access the information, and some of the people can only understand different languages, not English, then we should have the ability to put this information in the format in which they can access. You are talking about indigenous peoples and the local communities, and you want to explain to them, we may not use English. If we have a hotline for them to report, then we may not use English. But in the plan of conformance, which he presented yesterday, there was there is a plan to attempt and translate some of these into some of the top languages. I remember as if 4 were identified, and then we shall move from there. You can identify 4, and I think that is the plan of conformance. That is what is indicated in the plan of conformance, but it has not yet been done. So if we are reporting on 2024 end, we cannot say that this is going to be done. There is no document, there is no, work has not been initiated. We only report on what has been done. Again, that is the limitation of this kind of document. We keep what has been done. Then whoever reads it will again ask, yes, Uganda is not yet in position to pass information to people who don't know English. That is a comment which will come, and it is true. And we have nothing to do about it. So this is a summary of information showing the progress, what we have done so far, but what it will be showing will mean that everything else which is not included has not been done. And that is the truth. And that is what everyone else will see. But are we moving from this point to the next? So our focus should be updating the plan of conformance. And I think that's why I was talking to the gentleman who is in charge of that, to make sure that he ensures that in the future, people are able to access the information in the different languages, which makes them comfortable. There was a note on the National Environment Authority, and we note that. There was also a request to share this information. I think this report should be shared, but I also want to, because I have participated in many of these meetings, these workshops, and there has been requests to share reports. I've never seen any returned report. So if you want to look at it, yes, it is your document. But please, I wish you could promise to give us comments, including those which you will see when you read the report. That is when we improve our work. I don't think the donor, the one who is funding this, would want us to just go back and not give feedback, because then what is the purpose? It will be as if we have invited you to come and listen. Please, the commissioner, that is your area, not me, but how I wish they could help you to, so that you get output from somebody having to come from Karamoja to spend a lot of time here. Let's get the comments when the report is shared. And again, the person to share is not me, but I want to also say that it should be shared and we develop it together. But I also want us to develop it together, as I've said, by receiving input. And I was saying that the deadline is fast approaching. So if you received it, you should guarantee that within a week, you have put in maybe 30 minutes. Since we have all seen where our interests are, 30 minutes could do. There was a comment that the first summary of information presented in the morning had some gaps, and this should seek to close those gaps. What is my response? The gaps which were there, if there are gaps in the legal framework and the laws have not been changed, then this one will also go with those gaps. Because we are not going to polish the picture. We are showing the position where we find ourselves. If the institutions did not have an adequate mandate to address something during the previous reporting period, and nothing has been done now, that means we still go with that button. It still remains. Except if there is something which has been done to bridge those gaps, in which case we would register it. Now, some of the gaps, of course, of the, I don't think if we present like this, we shall be, I think we shall have improved a bit, isn't it? If we present like this, the document following this structure and make it concrete, not necessarily very bulky, it should also be about 40 or so pages, but showing Uganda's situation as far as addressing and respecting and addressing safeguards is concerned. Let's focus on that. The gaps which will remain, we shall pray. There will be reviews of the existing laws, policies, they will be updated. And I know there are some which are being updated, but which we cannot report on during this reporting period. But they are there, and the issues which we will continue to raise will further guide the government, the people in charge, to improve. Issues to do with the land use, as I said, those issues, that section where was presented in detail in the first summary of information, we shall build on that section to identify whether there are any improvements in the situations. If not, then we shall still try and carry that. The urban agenda, the Uganda urban policy, we'll see the period within which it fits, whether it is within the reporting period and its relevance to RED+ and specifically the safeguards. The indigenous person has been an issue coming up. What we are trying to do is to present the situation in which we are. We are not going to lie. We shall put what the Constitution says with the limitations it has. We shall put the laws with the limitations. There are many limitations. There are some international conventions which Uganda avoids deliberately. You know, ruling Uganda is not necessarily very easy, you people. So some of the things you must make sure that they do not interfere. It's not very easy. You must accept that. Uganda. So some of these, there are reasons why they are not accepted, and I would also not accept them, of course, but they are necessary for what we are doing here. Okay? So we have national circumstances. National circumstances is very important. They are things which we shall never change, which we do not have the capacity to change. Recognize them, look at whether there are mitigations, try to look for a way of moving, even with that. I hope. Minister of Energy, I think we talked about it briefly, but we identify where it is, because there are many safeguards. In some of them, Minister of Energy has nothing to do with indigenous people, for example, with respect of justice, nothing to do with access to information. We put it where it is necessary. Professionalism, mapping, yes, it is necessary. Again, the NGOs should be mapped. Yes, again, it is necessary. Where do we fit it in the safeguards? We shall look for whether it is possible to include it. I have not yet seen stakeholder engagement. We emphasized the process. The reason why we emphasized the process is because the stakeholder engagement plan also is more or less a framework which was just completed. You have been participating in reviewing and giving comments. So yes, it is in place now. And it came into force within the reporting period. So the most important thing for that period is that at least we got that. So we focused on it being developed. Again, its application will be how many sessions have we had together, how many different types of, if we get that information, we will say, yes, the approach, the yellow approach for Uganda is participatory, and there has been a process of engaging the different stakeholders, and so many have been engaged on issues related to this and that if it were possible, and they have participated in gender disaggregation. We emphasize the situation where indigenous peoples have participated, the situation where we have had the local communities participate. We could elaborate that, and we say during this period from January 1st, 2021 up to December, we had so many sessions, and that information I think I will be able to receive it, and then it will be included. The importance of other institutions participating, I think that one also will come in the, if we get information about stakeholder engagement and we report about it, we shall see that, we shall be able to see whether the government-related entities have been moving along with other entities. And that is important. Of course, it will show whether indeed there is the right engagement and involvement in the design and implementation of REDD+. Agroforestry as a component is highlighted briefly, and I think we should elaborate that. There's nothing much I would say. I don't know whether this is enough. I want to come up by one. Assistant Commissioner, you have?
Colleagues, is there any comments, any additions you would like to make? Otherwise, we have come to the end of this presentation. And I would like to invite you to join your hands to thank Albert for having done us good, for having done us the favor of presenting the complicated document before us. And we want to thank you that we have given our understanding, and our understanding is taken. We will see what to do with it going forward and improving the document further. Now we are going into the closing session. But before that, we have a pending assignment that you actually did yesterday. There were 4 groups, and I would like to see the secretaries of those groups. Who are they? Secretary, is it Hamba? We are for group 1. Group 2, Mami Serunkuma, you help me identify the other person. Group 2. Group 2 didn't have a secretary. Group 3, that was the Nachi Inji's group. Group 3, who compiled the discussions, outcomes of the discussions. And group 4, yes. Kindly, I will share an email, my email with you, and you share the PowerPoint presentation presentation or whatever documents you have, you share with me. We shall need those outcomes of those discussions for improving the document as you saw. Actually, some of the responses we have captured here relate to those discussions and outcomes. Sorry? Gruesome. You have them? Okay. Okay. Now we have come towards the end of the two-day workshop. I think it has been a worthwhile workshop, a worthwhile time well spent for this workshop. Is there somebody who can say one word or two words before we close? I think Professor Byakagaba. Yeah, I want you to say something about this capacity building workshop. Microphone.
For some reason, I'd chosen not to say much, but since you have provoked me to say something, I will say something. I want to thank, of course, the organizers. As a teacher, I like to start from the knowledge point of view. How many consider themselves to be new in this process? Like this was your first time to participate in this red process. I think Secretariat, Bob, this is for you, Commission. The people who are coming here for the very first time of this process, they are putting up their hands. Please. Okay. You'll receive feedback. You see, that's the beauty of being a commissioner. You have a whole line of people who are just watching to report to you. So it clearly shows that we still have a lot of learning to do. So we shouldn't get tired to learn. Then two, how many were aware of these Cancun safeguards? Again, I would like to see those that were familiar with the 7 Cancun safeguards. And those who are not, like this was their first time to encounter them. Okay, you've observed that these safeguards look very easy to understand, but also very difficult to agree on. Is that something you're able to pick? Especially the bit of interpreting who is an indigenous person and who is not. But I just thought that maybe as we go, do not in any way think that we have failed to agree on that, because this process has been on. We are about to celebrate 20 years. Xavier, how many years now of working on the software? Xavier likes to call it the software. So whatever we are doing, we are trying to make sure that we have very good software. So we shall definitely agree with time on some of these very contentious matters. Now, as an individual, I have a few observations of what we are preparing. I think it is important that those sticky areas, those areas that seem to be complicated for even us, the consultant and the technical team need to prioritize them. Because the more we fail to agree or build consensus on those sticky areas, the higher the chances are that individuals will complain. And maybe what Bob probably didn't mention, unlike other interventions, the RED Plus process requires what we call legitimacy. And it's not about the output, what we call output legitimacy, even the process. Usually people in government like to look at the output. If you want a road, they construct for you a road, you should be happy and forever grateful. Isn't that right? Now, for process legitimacy, we also ask, how did you construct that road? Were the people consulted about the design of the road? So even the process of constructing the road is equally important. So RED Plus is one of those governance interventions, forest governance interventions or policy instruments that requires legitimacy, meaning how acceptable our decisions. So it is important that we support them to make sure that what we have is acceptable. We shall attempt to make it acceptable to nearly everyone. So I thought I should be able to raise it. So in your report, it will be crucial for you to look at those areas that might delegitimize our report and our process. And among the areas that I think we need to be very cautious on is the part of benefit sharing. So we can't really sweep it under the carpet, because one of the biggest gaps we have in our laws is how do we share benefits that come from publicly managed forests. I think in our group we raised it. These central forest reserves, these local forest reserves, the benefits that come from there, how does the public benefit from them? The direct benefits, forget about the other environmental benefits. So that's something that we need to continue discussing on ensuring that it's acceptable in our system. Then there was also another gap, I think probably we need to talk about it on coordination. I think it didn't emerge, or if it emerged, I missed it. As you've observed, there are many actors within the state and outside the state that participate in this process of implementing REDD+. But even within government, we have a challenge of coordinating the state actors. Minister of Lands can issue a title in a reserve. Okay. Physical Planning Act, we are failing to enforce it as it should be. So what is it that we shall do to make sure that we don't have a situation where the last safeguard, which is on reversals, because all that brings reversals. You do everything well, and then because someone within the chain is not doing his or her work, then we lose it. So we may have to explore ways of ensuring that we address that in order to avoid reversals. I don't know whether you covered it, but forests on privately owned land, natural forests. We do not have a law currently that is very, that is enforceable on conversion of natural forests on private land into other land uses. That is why when people are grabbing forest land, they will get a freehold and then grow maize or sugarcane. Because if we had a law that would prevent people from converting a natural forest into maize or sugarcane, then the motivation to get freehold titles from forest reserves probably would be reduced. But currently, we are struggling with the National Environment Act, which talks of sustainable management of those forests, but still enforcing it is still a challenge. So I thought maybe we could also raise that as an issue. Then finally, because they give us 2 hours to talk, so I might easily use 2 hours. A typical session is 2 hours, so I will not use the 2 hours. I'm of the view that the Secretariat needs to keep you people, especially who have managed to come for this stakeholders meeting or workshop, to continuously engage. Part of the reason why people ask us questions, when are you starting, is we keep losing those that have been part of the journey. On how you do it, I don't know, but it might be important that you keep this team together, so that they continue engaging with you to make sure that we have a document that is going to be acceptable. And then we expect you to be, of course, our ambassadors. When people ask you as a DFO of Luero, what are those people doing in Luzira on REDD+, you should be able to tell them they are working on the software, so that when we start, it will be one of the best things that has happened to our country. Augusta, I have used your time, I think, effectively. Thank you very much for considering me as useful in this process. Thank you.
Of course you are. As I said earlier, we have come to the end of this meeting. But before the meeting, I have an announcement to make. And this announcement is by the hotel, which says it is ready to provide tea to participants here present who are wishing to stay. So in case you wish to stay, please, you can consult the participants there, sorry, the hotel, and they will provide you with the tea. a bonus. And now, to close this meeting, first I would like to say thank you to the presenters. I would like to say thank you to Mr. Kazungu Bob. You spent time compiling for us the information, and you gave us the presentation that was about the fulfillment of the safeguard requirements to comply to trees. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. To Mr. Nathan Munuzi, I remember very well the presentation, so detailed on the plan of conformity. It was well done. Thank you very much. To Albert to Tuijuche, you led us through the discussions on safeguards, what things we should consider to address or to respect the safeguards. You did it very well. And to Mr. Xavier Mugumya Nyindo, how better can someone present those safeguards, the history, the origin, and you framed for us the presentation on the summary of information. And lastly, to Mr. Tumujiche again, the presentation we've had that led us to the second summary of information. Ladies and gentlemen, there ends my terms of reference today. I live here without unemployment, formal employment, so I will go unemployed as we close this meeting. And to close this meeting is none other than our own. No, it is still to close. It is not to close. And to close this meeting is none other than our safeguards coordinator, Ministry of Water and Environment, Mr. Nathan Mononos. He doubles as also the contracts manager of this project. Therefore, is not a man that is so tiny. So, sir, you are welcome to close this meeting and say a few words.
I hope we are confirming that I'm your own, all of you. Okay. As we are coming to the end of our session, the one and a half days capacity building session, I think it is proper we thank our moderator because he was unable to tell us to thank himself. So it is proper. You've done a great job keeping us awake and alive for these 2 days. And also want to thank all of you for the commitment. We have had a full house all through. I know we are all busy people, but it's because we take it that the subject being discussed is important to all of us. And that's why we've been committed to it. We thank you so much. One, I'm speaking as the contract manager for this assignment that Albert has just talked about. And I was hesitating to comment as he was inviting me then, for one good reason that this task is still at infancy. Actually, we just prevailed over him to prepare the sketch and present, because we had this meeting where we had you, the important stakeholders, that we felt like we should actually share with you where we are, but also work with you in the coming period to ensure that we have the best we can get out of this. So we appreciate the comments you've given, and we shall definitely incorporate them, but also we do expect that there will be some more consultations from key stakeholders. So if consulted on the same, please give your input. We are all learning and doing at the same time, because some of these are relatively new to many of us. And sometimes when we get comments, we find some mixed comments. I was worried of the consultant that at some point he's working on a document as if he's preparing a proposal, as if it is work going to be done, as if he's reporting on what has been done. But I think that's what consultancy is all about. You take in everything and then you see about what works. But we take note of the comments, and we shall definitely incorporate whatever we feel should be put there. So one of the key deliverables we are undertaking in collaboration with Emily, I don't know whether it was well explained, but I remember yesterday during the opening remarks, the representative of Emily clearly stated it that they are the administrators of the support we are getting from UNEP on behalf of the Ministry of Water and Environment. So that explains why Emily is inviting us. And again, we are seeing Ministry of Water and Environment taking lead. So we are working on this deliverable, the second summary of information, which has been shared, of which the sketch has been shared. And so the next steps will include further consultations and then reviews and validation before we finalize with it. But under the same arrangement, we have other deliverables. We are supposed to come up with the safeguards information system. We are yet to get a consultant to do that. It will be another interesting session. So when we call upon you to be part of this, don't hesitate to come and join. We also have a nesting subject. This is what they call nesting. We shall be looking at safeguards information, safeguards work under nesting. I don't want to open up that other discussion. Just take it as nesting. If you don't know what it is, then we shall explain it sometime to come. So this is also going to come under that. And we are also doing the refinement of the registration documents. Bob mentioned yesterday that we have the draft registration document, the draft registration document, and the draft monitoring report, and also the plan of conformance, which I presented yesterday. So we are going to do refinement of these documents to include other sections that are coming in from FAO, and Uganda should be able to submit within this year. And it will be from that submission that we shall be having to update the plan of conformance. So a lot is going on. And I think what I'm saying is now a response to what Dr. Patrick mentioned, but he has worked out, that we should keep this discussion going, because sometimes we engage stakeholders and then they leave, and then we call them after 2 years. I was interacting with someone earlier and was like, some people thought that the readiness phase of RED was the implementation. And now, when it closed, people say, but we didn't see the project. What did they do? We were getting ready since 2008. Now, as we are transiting into the implementation, I don't know how long it is going to take to do the actual implementation, but at least we have hopes. You've already been informed about the ongoing preparation of the proposal, which is going to be channeled through FAO. The consultant has already contacted us and we have given input, and we still anticipate some more stakeholder engagements that where we shall be consulting you on the same proposal. So taking on from what we've got from this meeting, I think we shall be, when contacted, we should be referring to the Cancun safeguards vis-a-vis what we anticipate or what we have been giving. Like when we are talking of indigenous persons, if we agree on the scope of the project, then the indigenous persons within that project area will definitely be contacted, and their input has to be incorporated in the project. Then when it comes to second engagements, then we will be asking to what extent have we consulted the stakeholders to give input into the project. So a lot is going on. The secretariat is being beefed up because at the moment we've been having Bob and myself, but there are colleagues from FSSD at the ministry, and then there are colleagues from DES. Those who understand those terminologies, they're here to beef up the secretariat, but also we have the specialists whom we are hiring, supporting the running of the secretariat. So be expectant that the Red Plus is up and running. You were already told some work going on through FAO and then UNDP. So we are putting together all this and we shall be swinging into action in the time to come. I'm the one standing between your lunch and the early weekend, so I shouldn't be held accountable for this. I wish therefore to thank you very, very much for the time you've spent here in Entebbe, and I wish to wish you journey mercies back home for God and my country.